Okay. I know we just were streaming and now we're streaming again, right? Let's see. Do. Your stats are big. Yeah, I know. I know. Let's go back. Let's refresh. Can we refresh, friend? Okay. New stream. There we go. There we go. Okay. Again, I think I'm getting the YouTube streaming going. I think I'm starting to understand it a lot better. So again, sorry for delays in anything. But I wanted to talk about stats also, but I didn't want to tack it onto my Yanari video. I wanted to try to keep that pretty short. Yeah, first is best. I wanted to keep that one, under an hour, and I think I did, or at least right around. Yeah, I think he is, and I'm not far behind him. It's just one of those where again, like he and I are right there by each other, and I love that. I love that we're both like good enough to kind of push each other to be better and continue to play well. Like that's a fun interaction to have when you have friends that play the same army as your main army. So let's talk about stats, right? Uh, let's go to the meta analysis. Because they posted their new meta analysis, and I was like, this can't be right. Like, this is dumb. This can't be right. Uh, so let's take a look here. It has now been more than a month since the latest season of Warhammer 40k has begun, which has led enough time. Blah 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 blah. Studio lead Stu is here to tell us what the picture is like. I'm not going to watch the video. Probably get copyright strikes if I do anyway. So event attendance is up around the globe. We handled 50% more games in data this February compared with last February. A big shock. Uh, okay, so Dark Angels and Gene Stealer Cult are definitely leading the pack. Okay, uh, and again, uh, man, not to point out how smart I am, right? But there's a video here somewhere in my backlog of videos where I talked about how Dark Angels are going to be the best Marine army once they got Armor of Contempt went away and the secondaries changed and everything after that data slate, and they got sticky objectives and all the other things that they got. A lot of people were like, "Oh, Iron Hands are going to be too good, busted," and I was like, "Nope. Dark Angels going to be real fucking good," and the reason is because, in my opinion, they are the best multi-phase Marine army. There isn't a thing that they don't do well, right? They're not like amazing at any one thing unless you lean into that one thing super hard. But they are the best Swiss Army knife Marine Army, which lets you build a lot of different ways and lets you do a lot of different things. Man, I love Bailey over at Dank Lists to death. He's on my team. Great dude. Hasn't played 40k in a year and is consistently scoring 80 plus points a game. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. Is like I'm not trying to put him down, but after a year off, he's gonna have some rust. And Homeboy is still scoring in wins and or losses 80 plus points a game. Yes, he's put the time in. Yes, he knows his army, but also yes, like the army can score well, right? It's a combination of a lot of things. Do they have a 59% win rate? I highly doubt it. Uh, and that's what's weird to me is I'm looking at these stats and I'm like, something's not sitting right. And another thing I'd like to point out is how many people were on the Death Watch hype train and how poorly they're supposedly doing right now. And I think it's because, again, we just talked about it in the Yanari video. One person does a list and everybody's like, oh, this is the only way to play it. Guys, I don't know if you know this. Deathwatch has jump pack troops with OBSEC that you can give Storm Shields and Thunderhammers to. The fact that people are not leaning into that tells me, like, okay, too many people are just getting on Reddit or some of these podcasts where they're just like, this is the only way to play this army, and then that's what they're doing. And then they're getting hammered because they're not really putting their own thought or their own spin into it. Yeah. Well, and so interestingly, like I said, I don't think this is an accurate depiction of where these armies are, right? And let's go down the list. We've got Dark Angels at 59%. I doubt they're that high. I doubt they're that high. I bet they're closer to the 54 to 55%. And the reason I say that, and I know this is anecdotal evidence, all right? I'm going to just be upfront and say that. It's anecdotal evidence, but at CAG Bash, right, there were multiple Dark Angels players that lost either 4 or 5 of the games in a 5-round event. So if they had a 60% win rate and the Army was that good, all those players should have at least won 2 to 3 games, right? Even if everybody that played Dark Angels went 3-2, that would be more indicative of how good that army is, quote unquote. Gene Stealer Cult is interesting also. They have basically not been touched since the Codex came out. None of their secondaries have really changed. They've had a couple of points adjustments, like Aberrants went down like 2 points, but the bikes went up 3 points, but the melee profile just got baked into the bike at that point. So effectively, you can't not take the melee profile. But really, and I was talking to the GSC player I played at the tournament, right? Because I was curious to know what the hell's going on that they're winning so much. And I don't know what it is because, like, they're an army that needs their troops. So Arcs of Omen doesn't really help them or hurt them that much. And I think you're hitting it spot on, Dan. I think we've got the 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 people who are playing GSC are GSC players right now. And then you couple that with the shift in Marine meta, and I think it has just become easier for them to get their points, right? With NIDS not just mortal wounding everything off the table and having some more elite armies like Custodes kind of leaping back on, I think we are kind of hitting that where GSC players have the space to operate better. And I think that's a lot of it. It's just interesting, and it could just be matchup specific. Like these last couple months, the Gene Stealer Cult players may have just gotten the matchups that they need. When I played GSE, the one thing I did notice, and that's kind of I've dabbled with the book, and my interaction with it was like for secondaries, I'm just scoring my points. Like 2 of my 3 secondaries, I'm scoring my points. Get fucked. You can't do anything about it, right? The third one is a little iffy, but and primaries can be a little iffy, and that's why I think maybe like the shift in elites, like Marines, kind of coming back on lately, is giving them a little bit more breathing space to kind of grab objectives. Sticky objectives means Marine players are leaving them a bit more, so they can kind of deep strike onto them easier and stuff like that. So that a lot of things could go into it. Custodes back up to 55%. And again, I don't know how accurate this is. Once we go through this list, I'm going to go to a couple of stats websites and I'm going to show everybody a few interesting things that really makes me skeptical of the data that Games Workshop puts out on their meta analysis, right? Because they don't tell you where they get it from. They just say, here's the data. Custodes 55%. Yes, and we're going to get to that in a minute also. Big shock. Custodes were pretty big dumb when they released, and now that they're effectively on their launch day codex, most of the nerfs have been repealed. They're back to just kind of being big dumb. They're definitely a beatable army, but I'm not surprised that it's one of the armies that all the meta hopping players are hopping to, right? Orcs 54%. I can unequivocally tell you this is not accurate, right? With confidence, I can tell you that orcs are not winning 54% of their games. And again, when we dig into I've already done a video on this, but when we dig into the deeper issues here and we dig into the real stats, you'll see what I'm saying. They're hovering closer to 50%. Death Skulls having army-wide OBSEC effectively does help them. And that's what Dan's touching on, is they don't have to bring boys, and it's one of those where I hear people talk about how bad their troops are. Bro, your troops are fine. Take Orc boys to a game and see how you feel about your troops afterward, right? So having OBSEC on your knobs, your mega knobs, and all these other infantry units, really, really good. I will say, again, I went to Cagbash. I literally had 0 OBSEC in my whole list, and it lost me 1 game. And that was the Custodes player, because they had basically army-wide OBSEC, and it was still a winnable game, and I still scored 30 points on primaries with 0 OBSEC against all OBSEC. So it's one of those where it's still a winnable game. I just misplayed a few units, and it cost me a lot of points. Guard and Votan at 53%. And again, so one thing I am going to point out is outside of demons, custodes, and orcs, right? Votan, Guard, Dark Angels, GSC. Most of these are building shooty builds. So we're being dominated by a very shooting heavy meta right now, according to these stats. And demons could go either way. I don't know what the demon builds are right now, because they could still be Tzeentch demons with some guns. They're probably a bit more Slanesh demons at this point, but I don't know. Asuryani hovering around 51%. And I think that's also just including Yanari in it. So again, skewing the stats is most likely. Like orcs, even if orcs were at 54%, Goffs are at 54%, right? Death Skulls, and then everything else is super low. So again, we're not seeing a full picture. We're just seeing this is a good army. No, it's not, right? And I've done a video on this, but I wanted to kind of expose a little bit more on it. Chaos Knights sitting around 50%, Space Wolves 50%, Harlequins, and I don't think Harlequins are probably that high. Drukhari 49%. That is bullshit. I know they're not 49%, and we'll kind of dig into that one. And we're gonna talk about why this is just so crazy, right? We got Adeptus Astartes, which is just like generic Space Marines, which sure, man, I don't even know what that refers to. I don't know if that's just Codex Marines or what. It's just one of those where there's like a different Marine army for everything. Tau at 46%. Again, I don't think that that's accurate. I bet they're a little bit higher, although it may be that because of other factions getting played and not having as good of a win rate as Tau Sept and Farsight, or Borkan is actually one that's come on strong too. And a lot of the reason Borkan's come on strong is because Armor of Contempt went away, right? Autocannons have come back on, and Borkan makes autocannon strength 6 instead of strength 7. So it's one of those where it's just kind of the shifting of the meta, and that's fine. I just don't think that 46 is accurate for Tau. I think they're probably closer to 48 to 52, somewhere in that range. Eldari, again, we have Asuryani, so what the hell is Eldari? Is that just soup? Like when you take the detachment of Harlequins? I don't know. AdMech 45%. So AdMech being 45% both shocks me and doesn't shock me. And I think the issue with AdMech, right, is that they just don't have secondaries that they can score easily. They'll absolutely just kill things, right? And they can stay on the table pretty well. But I think the issue becomes their secondaries are super weird. I love them. They're very flavorful, but they're super weird. One of them is very good depending on the mission, and it's your opponent picks one objective in no man's land, or not in their deployment zone. Their opponent picks one objective not in their deployment zone, and if you control that objective at the end of your turn as the AdMech player, you get 5 points. And I played, and arguably it was a good matchup for me, but I played a Wraith Knight heavy list last night, and I scored 15 on it in the first 3 turns, and it was just yeah, no, this is super good. mission dependent. Like I wouldn't take it on a mission like Data Scry Salvage or Tide of Conviction, where I have to get across the middle of the table in order to score it. But I would definitely take it in like Abandoned Sanctuaries or even like Death and Zeal because it's a lot easier to score. Blah 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 blah. T Sun's 42%. I don't have an opinion on that, right? Like I don't know. I don't think they're that bad. And usually T Suns is actually T Suns and Demon Soup. Necron's 45%. That's interesting. I don't know what changed with them. One of their secondaries must have changed to where they're not just automatically capping it every game. And then Blood Angels and Tyranids. So, blah, 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 blah. So, data taken from 30th January to 6th March 2023. From where? Where is it taken from? From like my fucking mom's house? Like, where are we getting this, right? So let's do this, because Goonhammer 40k stats, right? Arguably, this is probably where we're getting it. So let's go to our faction stats. Let's go to games by faction. All right, so 30th January to 6th March, which I think actually encompasses Kagbash, right? 6th March. Yeah. Awesome. All right, so 30th January. So here's our mission pack, right? Hey, guess what's not on Goonhammer's stats website? Awesome. Super cool. So let's change the date to 30th of January. Awesome. So I can't get the stats on Goonhammer, right? They're just not there. So I don't know where they're getting their data from, right? So let's just do 40k stats. So we've already checked Goonhammer, and Goonhammer pulls directly from, and they'll tell you here. Let's open it back up. They'll tell you where they get their data from. And they are the premier site on the internet for 40k statistics and analysis. But I can't get Arcs of Omen statistics. What the fuck, guys? That's not very premier. Win rate by faction mission. Guess what? There's no Arcs of Omen stuff. So what happens if I do January? So again, I love Games Workshop, but I don't know where they're getting their stats. So now if we go to stat check, right? Let's pull this one up. This one's pretty interesting, and you can get a lot of good, useful data here. Let's scroll all the way down to the bottom. Let's read this right here. We've put together a public data dashboard that provides the quickest at-a-glance computer screen assessment of overall competitive meta for Warhammer 40,000. The data that drives this dashboard is all Warhammer 40,000 events across the globe that have a minimum of 25 players with 5 rounds. Okay. Does it give me a source for the data, right? And again, I have to assume that it's also just pulling from BCP because it is, I'm sure it's not the only tournament organization software, but it is the most commonly used, would be my assumption. But it tells you, it's very open and honest what it is they're using to collect their data. Why do they do events with a minimum of 25 players and 5 rounds? So why is it GTs and better instead of encompassing RTTs? I'm going to tell you why. And again, I'm not going to name names. I'm just going to talk about some situations that I know exist. There are Warhammer 40k teams out there, okay? And they'll do small tournaments in their basement with just their team. And they will do them ITC ranked. So they'll basically be able to pad their own stats by doing events in their basement or at their house or whatever with only guys on their team, and they'll just be able to kind of like artificially inflate their stats by having ITC points for playing matches for a practice tournament, basically, right? So that would be an RTT. That's bad data because it's a very closed off uh, event. Why else? So I went to a tournament in South Bend. The skill level was all over the place. Right, you had some very very good players. I would even argue some great players, like some top 10, top 20 players. Uh, and then you also had dudes who this was their first tournament. So your skill level tends to vary a lot more at RTTs because they're easy to access, they're cheaper, they're shorter, and it's just easier for more players to get involved, right? It's easier for me as a player to go, okay, I can only drive to Lafayette and play for 1 day. I can't drive to Lafayette and play for 2 days. So you get a lot more like local friendly players at your RTTs. So your skill level is a lot varied. So that's another reason why they're only doing GTs. So when you're eliminating the wider skill variance and you're eliminating the and there was a team that actually got in trouble for this not too long ago, like within the last year. And again, I'm not calling anybody out. I don't give a shit what they do. I'm just trying to explain to you why this is the way it is. But there was a team that got in trouble for this not that long ago. Basically, they had an event and it was only their people at the event, and it was closed off to people who weren't on their team, and then it got submitted for ITC points. So this is why we do GTs for data collecting. Not because good players don't go to RTTs, but because you have a bigger skill variance and the GTs give you a more consistent data subset. Is it perfect? No, it's absolutely not perfect because you're going to get some very weird lists at RTTs that could do well at GTs, but for whatever reason, maybe those players just can't go to GTs, right? So, what did I say was probably not accurate, right? Now that we know at least what their criteria was, let's move this over. So we know what this is for criteria. So let's look at Dark Angels. Player faction. We can go here, we click all, and then if we click Dark Angels, boop, click it. Now, we need dates, right? Do we have dates on here? I know we do. Date. There we go. We're going to unclick this. We'll start at the 29th, all right? And this will give us the 29th through the 5th. Bam. All right, so 619 games played, right? I don't know what Hunters of Beasts are, but only 3 games were played. And they had a 60, so somebody went 2-1 at a tournament with this list, is all that means. Which is weird. And that may be a league that's not done or whatever, okay? Boop, 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 boop. So actually, Dark Angels are sitting around. And actually, let's copy this real quick because I want to show you something else. Boop, boop, boop. Meta dashboard. So we're going to, where is it? There is a graph you can do, and I'm trying to remember where it's at. Faction ranking? Give me a second. Let's see. Boop, boop. So according to this, right, the meta overview, GSC has a higher win rate. Actually, let's change our dates here. And then let's click this one. Let's take out the 22nd. Yeah, according to this, GSC has a higher win rate. And it might be because we're a week back. Let's see. Let's take out the 29th and see if that changes anything. Nope. Dark Angel's sitting around 57%. So that is actually, they're basically flipped according to this. And this is GTs only. Demons 57%. Orcs 53%. But let's dig into this. Let's click on Orcs. So Goffs are at 56%. Descals are at 50%. None listed. So again, none listed is bad data. We have to basically pretend that that does not exist because it's only 5 games and that skews the percentage vastly. So that's again something to keep in mind. Anything where you don't have a faction listed, especially with orcs where they don't have a custom and you can't just throw it in with the customs, is bad fucking data. It's unusable and it throws off your average, right? Let's grab a calculator real quick and I'll show you what I mean. Holy cow, my phone is going ham. So we've got 56 plus 50 plus 60 plus 50 plus 10 plus 20 plus 20 equals divided by 7. Yeah, so again, I'm not sure how they're getting their averages because that's not an average. I need to figure this out. This is interesting because, like with Goonhammer, they just total up all the win percentages and then divide by the sub factions to get the overall win percentage. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, something here is just not adding up right though. 56 plus 50 plus 60 plus 50 plus 50. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure how they're getting their averages. Let me see if it says down here. All right, so not 100% sure, right? But basically know that none listed is unusable data, right? If we take this out, the win percentage drops a lot. And I don't know that we can take it out, right? But Goff's 56, Desco's 50. If we skip this, Evil Sons is 50%. But let me tell you something, all right? There's 22 games in Evil Sons, and I account for 8 of them. And over 8 games, I'm 6-2. All right. So there's 14 games there, and that means of the other 14 games, their win rate is bad enough that it takes it down to 50%. Freebooters 10, Blood Axe is 5, and Bad Moon's 5. So again, unusable data. So orcs are probably sitting closer to 50% once you take out this unusable data. Let's see. Dark Angels we already looked at, and again, like that's fine. I don't know how how are we seeing 59% on Gene Stealer Cult and 57% for Dark Angels, but then on the community page we're seeing the exact opposite, right? Yeah, and I agree with you on both points, Dan. I think it's better to just pull from GTs and not from RTTs. Sorry, I don't have the chat up while I'm doing this because I'm having to use both my screens. And there may be some sort of weighting based on the total games. Like they may weight the percentages higher. But again, like the anything where you don't have a sub-faction listed is unusable data, period, end of discussion, simply because it cannot be used. It will throw your averages off. It just does, and for no reason. Let's see. They don't even have world eaters on here. I don't see. Do you guys see world eaters? Let me know. Well, here. Right? I don't see him. Does anybody else see him? We can close that. Let me go back there. So yeah, world eaters aren't even on here, and world eaters are fucking it up right now, right? Like those boys are going ham. There were multiple world eaters in like the top 10 at Cag Bash, for example. Asuryani. Let's click on Asuryani. Hail of Doom has an 85% win rate and 20 games, so that's interesting. But it's also soup, right? Because they've got Hail of Doom and Twilight. Biltan, 33. Hail of Doom, 54. Yanari, 58. So again, Yanari throwing off the average. Yanari Light throwing off the average. And then Hail of Doom, Twilight throwing off the average, right? Children of the Open Skies and Vengeful, pretty good, 50% win rate. I'm curious. I'm going to have to dig into these a bit more because this is surprising. But this is honestly, in 20 games. Oh, shit. There we go. Go back. I fucked it up. Date. Let's take it out, son. Oh. Bro, imagine just not being a dumbass. All right, let's do that. Boop. Let's go back to orcs real quick. So if we go back to orcs, right? How did I get there? Exclude. All right. So according to this, excluding that, the unusable data only drops them to 53%. So again, I'm not sure how they're weighting all of this, but there's obviously some sort of games played weighting going on, like some sort of way to kind of see what the averages are. But again, 52, 53% is a lot more reasonable in my head for orcs. So that did throw it off a percent or two. And Goff's is literally what's carrying it. Like, and it's the same goddamn list that orc players have been running basically since the aircraft nerf, and it's just squigs and kill rigs, and that's it. Like I said, the Evil Sons, arguably, you can't really keep that data. I mean, you can, but I could tell you like 8 of those games are just me, right? And I went 6-2 in those 8 games. So it's one of those where I am also just throwing off the average at this point. Like I think Deskol's having 89 and Goff's having 371 is more indicative of where the power in the codex lies. I'm just an idiot and I just run dumb stuff, right? So bam. All right, where were we? We were talking about because there's no world eaters. Now let's look at the Guards, right? Because I think Guard have got to be a little bit higher than what they're saying here. So let's go to. Oh, we're over here. Woo. Astra Militarum. So this is 53%. Armored superior. Okay. I don't know what's armored superiority. Dan, are you still in there? Can you let me know? I don't know what that one is. Interestingly, mechanized isn't even in here, which is crazy to me. Like, how is nobody running mechanized? Look at all this bad data down here, right? 6 games, 6 games, 6 games, 3 games, right? And they could have just dropped, actually. Like, so much bad data. Like, 55% win rate with Born Soldiers, and that's almost 3/4 of guard player. To me, this is much more indicative of where guard is at, right? Swift is the win in armored superiority. Tanks count. Okay, that makes sense. And that is bam. So again, like, yeah, overall, guard has a 50, what was it? 53% win rate? Sure. Uh, but really, they have a 55% win rate. Like, but also they don't. It's so weird. And that's why you've got to dig into the stats. You can't just take whatever's presented to you at face value. You have to understand what the numbers behind the numbers mean. It's basically saying that almost 80% of the players playing guard are playing born soldiers, and that those players are winning 55% of their games. So that means 76%, it's actually almost 77, 70% of guard players are winning 55% of their game. And then 5% of guard players are winning 63% of their game. So basically, you could say that 80% of guards players are winning about 60 to 58% of their games. And then the other 20% are just all over the place. So again, super weird. Um, there's mechanized infantry. Big shock that that's got a fucking 67% win rate. And I know it's only 6 games, but mechanized infantry, I'm telling you guys, like, that one is very good. It just requires some brains. Okay, so let's look at Drukari, because I get the feeling this one's going to be a little bit different. So according to this, Drukari is 48%, right? And according to this, Drukari is 49%. Let's look at Drukari and why they're 48%. Blackheart, Precise Killers, Test of Skill, Prophets of Flesh. Precise Killers, I don't remember what Precise Killers is. And Test of Skill, I think, is the one where you add one to wound rolls against vehicles. And that's carrying the whole army. And it's 17 games. So 5% of the player population is carrying the whole army, right? And then this one is basically the same thing, just using Dark Technomancers instead of Prophets of Flesh, and it's a percent. So again, they don't really have a 48% win rate, 49% win rate. You just have one faction throwing off your average, and it's 5% of the player population throwing off your average, right? So it's like, when literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different subsets of data are at average or worse in most cases, you don't really have this 48% win rate. You just have one thing doing well. And that doesn't mean that the book is good or the army's good. It means that, like, at 17 games, it means 1 or 2 players went to a couple of events and did well, right? That's all it means. And they got their matchups that they needed. They probably went first most of their games. So it's just like, sure, man. Which is, again, why we got to be wary of this data, right? They present it to you like this is the end all be all. But really, if we dig a little deeper, we can see what's really going on. Now, according to this, Custodes are sitting at 53%, right? So I don't know what Hunters of Beast frontline fighters are. I have no clue, right? None of this makes sense to me. I don't know what it is. I don't know if these are like knights that they can soup in or what. Uh, but 50% of players are winning 54%. So this one's probably actually like a accurate representation of how good the army is, right? Because most of the codex is 50% or better. You only have 2 outliers, and it's literally one event per outlier. And they just didn't do well at the event. And again, I don't even know what Frontline Fighters is or Hunters of Beasts. So I would have to dig deeper to find out what that actually means. So this one's actually pretty indicative of what it is they're trying to show us. Adeptus Astartes, let's look at this shit show. Because again, I don't know what that even means. I don't even know if we can just look at Adeptus Astartes. I don't think we can. Maybe it's just Space Marines. Do 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 do. Iron Hands, 55% according to this. Are they even on the meta watch here, or they just fall underneath Adeptus Astartes? They probably, I bet they're Codex compliant, so I bet they fall under Adeptus Astartes. Yeah, there it is. Okay, and again, so GW's like, oh, Adeptus Astartes is still sitting at 48%, right? I think that's what it is. But then here we are, Iron Hands, 55%, right? Get the fuck out of here. Black Templars, 52%. Are they even on here? Right, not even on here. So they probably fall under the Codex compliant Adeptus Astartes banner. So again, Salamander's 49%. So there's some shadiness going on here, right? Grey Knights 48%. Where were Grey Knights over here? 48%. And with Grey Knights, let's take a look. Let's see what our, so there's not a lot of variance here, right? Interesting. And then let's look at Sisters, 46%. I want to look at Sisters. I want to look at Necrons because those are the two to me that are like, okay. They got Sisters at 45. They've got Sisters at 46. Okay, now I've got to Google this. Hunters of Beasts 40k. What is this? It is Knights. Okay, that's what I figured. And again, uh, not to be that guy, but that's bad data, right? Because it's not indicative of how the codex is by itself when a big chunk, right? We've got 5 games with Sacred Rose, 8 games with Soup, 5 games with Soup. So we've got 13 games with Soup, and then everything else is mono faction. It's not a good indication of how strong the army or codex actually is. It's just a this is Soup. Um, Again, we're skewing statistics a little bit here. And I have no doubts that that is how we get to the 46% here also. Not that it's weird because like arguably they should be separated, right? Um, it should be if you bring Soup, this is this. If you bring Just Sisters, this is this, right? Um, and this is kind of where Sisters have been is what Argent Shroud did okay for a bit, but Bloody Rose has always kind of been top, and Ebon Chalice I think is the one that does the Miracle Die interactions, so they've also been pretty good because they have the Miracle Die secondary. I could be wrong, but I think that's what they do. And Dan, if you're still out there, feel free to correct me on this. I know you know that codex a little bit better than I do. And I think part of it was because Bloody Rose had all their DLC kind of axed because they had a lot of extra strats from one of the books, and now it's gone. I love Bloody Rose. It had nothing to do with meta. I just love the way like melee, like that's just how I play. So that was always to me just like the clear cut winner. In an army where your shooting can be very good, and you just have strength 3 T3 models, anything that makes your melee better is just going to shore up your weaknesses. That's always how I've kind of seen it. So that's interesting. Again, and arguably Ebon Chalice is just throwing off that whole thing, and it's 5 games. But again, we don't. I would argue that you don't have enough data here to get an accurate representation of how good the army's actually doing. They've obviously fallen off with 216 total games played. Let's see. if we can click on that. Because that's obviously not 216 games. So let's see if we can figure out where all these games are at. What happens when we click there? There we go. Yeah, there it is. I just clicked on the wrong thing. Here's the better breakdown. So Bloody Rose is actually at 43%. So losing that DLC kind of hurt them. And again, you're starting to see less meta chasers playing it and more just like sisters players playing it. Valorous Heart 16, Argent Shroud 16. So again, most of them are still playing Bloody Rose. And man, Melee Sisters is not easy. Like, I don't care what anybody says, they're not easy. Let me look at something here real quick. Because now that I've realized that I was an idiot. Yeah, there we go. So if we actually, I wanted to double check the Drukari thing here now that I realized that I just clicked wrong. So look, we have 17 games, 68% win rate. So that's probably 2 to 3 big events, right? Uh, Somebody did well, and it's probably the same person to be fair. And then everything else is like 50 or less. Like there's no way they actually have a good win rate. Like that's no. All right, cool. Glad I realized my mistake there. So now let's look at crons, because crons seem to have fallen off according to what we're reading, right? Nihilak, 47% win rate. I don't know what Nihilak is. Novak, 49% win rate. I know that one. So this one doesn't really surprise me because of the melee bonuses that they get. Again, you have a very shooty army, so anything that can shore up their weaknesses is going to help them. Cesarak, Sawtek, and then Mefrit's down. So we've got 9, 12, 40 games where they're 43% or less, but we've got 5, 12, 20 games where they're 50 over 50 or more, so we got 20 more. So yeah, we're probably in that like this is probably pretty accurate. The 47% is probably pretty accurate, right? Here's one with a huge discrepancy. NIDS, right? Where were they? Oh, 45, not a huge one, just a little one. 46, right? Um, Behemoth is the new hotness, but it only has a 48% win rate. Uh, Crazy Leviathan still doing really well, right? And then some customs, but not enough games for it to really matter. 44 with Gorgon. Gorgon could be really good, but it's very matchup specific. So again, it's one of those where Big Shock Leviathan's still really good, whereas this is just like one dude went to an event or lady. Like I'm not trying to be that way. And like Hydra, that's one event, one event, one event. Whereas this is like 10 events, right? 10 events. Uh, this is probably 8 events. Like we're getting much better data from some of these other ones. So yeah, they're probably pretty close to that. But again, like why do we have these 1 or 2% discrepancies? Let's see. Let's go to Death Watch. And I had seen somewhere where White Scars are actually like in the 50% win rate. So that's interesting. I'll have to see if I can dig that up. Death Watch. Ooh, 41%. But how many games do we have? 35. And again, I just feel like most players aren't playing Deathwatch in a way that maximizes what they can actually do. Most players are just probably bringing like, here's my dreadnoughts, because that's historically what it's been. Here's my dreadnoughts, right? So again, I know I already made a video on this, but I wanted to reach out to everybody and talk to it again, just to let them know. Like, first of all, understand that what's being presented to you here isn't always completely accurate, right? And they don't give us a source for their stats. Because like I tried looking on Goonhammer, and Goonhammer doesn't have published statistics for January, right? We all did it publicly. So unless there's something I'm missing, and there may be, I'm not saying there isn't, but unless there's something I'm missing, like sure, man, whatever you say. So we don't have a source for the stats, and then we see that like orcs are not actually 54%. Goffs are 54%, and that's not the same thing because there's no internal balance in these books, right? Some of them, and that's the issue. While we're at it, I did want to look at demons because I was just curious to see what's doing so well. See, and they've got demons at 57%, whereas here we've got them at 55. And it doesn't seem like a lot, but that right here, 55% is the top end of don't nerf. 57% is nerf a little bit. So Demon Soup, 57% win rate. Uh, Demons, fucking Matt. Oh my god. How many games is this? I'm gonna have to see if this is Matt Miller. Um, Everything else, so just demons by itself is 57%, right? But demons with knights is where they struggle. One faction struggles. So everything else is doing really well. So again, can we see like the subsets here? I am curious to know if this is my boy Matt Miller. Uh, Fucking idiot. Let's see. I know. Oh, let's go to faction ranking. So, nope, that's not what we wanted. There's this really cool like. It's probably here somewhere. This might be it. Mirror false. So let's go to date, right? That's why. So let's turn this off. Boop, 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 boop. And this is really cool. And actually, let's take the first off because I think we need to go to the 29th. There we go. Let's do that. So this just gives you a chart that kind of tells you where every faction is sitting at a quick glance, right? So we've got Yanari or Harlequins. And it even breaks it down. Like veterans have a win rate of 53%, newcomers have a win rate of 58%. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know how it breaks that down. I have no clue. Um, Iron Hands, Chaos Demons, uh, Chaos, right? Orcs. And this for me, like if you look at this, orcs makes sense, right? And they're hovering right around 50% when you average it out. Orc players like myself and John Anto, we're doing really well with the army, right? But people who aren't doing well with the like people who don't know it the way we do aren't doing as well. This one makes sense. Like this Harlequins one is really weird to me. I would think those numbers should be reversed, right? Uh, World Eaters, veterans win rate 51%. I don't know how you're a veterans World Eaters player, like whatever. Um, again, I don't know how that breaks down. But now here we look at like sisters, and I've got the same dates, right? Yeah, maybe this, maybe I turned that one off too. Ooh, I bet I did. Shit. See how drastically this changes, right? So this is really neat, right? And you can actually like, let's click on one of these. Let's find one that's, let's click on orcs because those are my boys. And so what we can even do is like, okay, opponent subfaction, right? Boop, Alpha Legion. So this is what everything does against Alpha Legion. And I might have screwed it up, but let's find one that we know is going to have data. We know Wh40k's going to have data. Right, so here. So it's interesting. Like you can really play around. I'll put the link in here with this. There's a lot of good data in here. Links in the chat. Um, so there's a lot of good data, a lot of good information here. And it's one of those where I like to look at it just to kind of get an understanding of where the game is. But I definitely don't use that for any kind of like basis or decision making, except for a few things, right? Like if we go to faction, actually let's do this. Meta matchup. I think this is actually what we want. So where is? Oh my God, what a fucking mess this is. My brain hurts. We can. Yep, this is usable data. We can fuck with this. All right, so let's click on Tau. So Tau right now, according to this, 48% win rate, right? Tau Sep 51, Farsight 52, Wh40k 40. Although Wh40k, I don't know if this has. It probably does, but they just won something big. But again, it's matchup. Sasia, and then uh, a couple of real good win rates for a couple of customs, and a couple of poopy win rates, and then a 50%, right? So again, sure, Tau's at a 48% win rate, but almost 470 games have a 51 or 52% win rate out of the over over half, 2/3 of the game, right? 2/3 of the army has a 51% or better win rate, and then everything else just kind of falls off drastically. So again, at a tournament, you're probably hitting Tau Sept, you're probably hitting Farsight. Um, and if you're not, that's fine. But it's one of those where it's just really interesting because, yeah, overall they've got a 48, but really they have like a 51. Like they're a very balanced army right now. It's just the internal balance between the factions isn't great, right? Because Tau Sept gives you a lot, and they have Shadow Sun, and then Farsight really rewards aggressive players for being aggressive. Whereas Tau Sept just like gives you a lot of rule support. Farsight just it rewards you for being aggressive. Whereas the other ones don't really do much. Sasia actually has a couple of good interactions, but again, uh, only 34 games played. So it's like once you get outside of Tau Sept and Farsight, you're probably getting some more lore guys than you are like tournament guys, if that makes sense. I would play Sasia. I like Sasia. I like the way they interact and handle. They got some neat abilities and rules. But again, 34 games means it's probably just like lore monkeys doing it. And I don't, again, mean anything derogatory by that. And then again, if we look at orcs, again, Goths, 55%, 53% for Death Skulls for this. We just have different dates. 50%, then everything falls off drastically. So again, and really like the Goths and the Death Skulls have very similar lists. I've seen them, and out of 649 games, 500, almost 600 of them are these two armies. So you could make a strong argument that, like, again, 2 armies in the codex, and then everything falls off. And again, like I said, like Evil Sons is that's me. Before I went to 2 events with Evil Sons, they had a 25% win rate. Like, is what it is. It's just that there's not enough data there. And again, I'm not trying to like suck my own dick. It's just there's not enough data there for us to be able to be like, okay, this is good or this is bad. Like, I got lucky into a couple of my matchups. I will be straight up about it. Some of them I just outplayed the people. Some of them I just got good matchups. Is what it is. GSC. Now this one's super. Oh, god dang. Uh, and again, we have one more week, right? Our dates are a little different than they were because we've got the weekend of the 22nd, which was like the launch of Arcs of Omen. Uh, Jesus, man, 600. They've got 434 games. One, two, three, 300 of them. Twisted Helix, let's go. That's the faction I would play if I played them. It's very mobile, and I love it. But yeah, so it's one of those where we look at this data, right, and we know that the book is strong, and we can actually look at their win rate versus other factions, right? Uh, AdMech, 45% win rate, but only 11 games. But that makes sense. AdMech has a lot of fucking shooting, and they have solid melee units that they can bring as well. Grey Knights also makes sense. Mortal Wounds, 8 games. World Eaters, not surprised. White Scars, Raven Guard. Yep. Where's Orcs on here? I'm curious to see where they. Yeah, and again, I'm not surprised that they struggle into Orcs because again, I can just bring a lot of bodies, a lot of units. So again, I love this website for finding data because it lets me see through the bullshit that's being presented to me by the people who are presenting actual bullshit. World Eaters 56% win rate. With Demons 64. How many games do we got here? 212. Fuck. All right. So, and then, is there anything else I really wanted to dig into? Let's look at these demons real quick. Yeah, that's it. Look at that. 822 games, 765 of them have a 57% win rate, right? Because like this site, what it'll do is if the data isn't a big enough sample size, it'll just be like this doesn't fucking matter. It just doesn't count, which is why I love this. Guard 52. We already talked about Guard, but again, links in the chat. It is a very useful tool for understanding what's being presented to you. I just ask that you remember when you see a meta watch, right? And they start presenting things like this, like Dark Angels. Where's Dark Angels on here? 59% win rate according to this, right? Which is where they're at, but according to them, January 30th. But Gene Stealer's at a 60 and Gene Stealer's at a 57 here. So again, there's some sort of skew or data hiding or something's being misrepresented. And I'm not saying it's intentional. I'm just saying like there's a discrepancy in the data being used and how it's being presented. And I'm just curious to know what it is, which is why I encourage everybody to just kind of do their own research, right? Um, and that's the main thing, and that's all I ask. Before we wrap up, again, big shout out to Military Game Command. It's a nonprofit, and again, I've talked about it a ton. Just go to militarygamecommand.org, see what they do. I'm doing a fundraiser for them in June. It'll be a big apocalypse game. It's going to be super cool. We're going to do that in the Chesterton store, Reliquary Gaming. Big shout out to Brandon and Christy. Those folks have been amazing. They have welcomed me into their community. They have allowed me to bring my community and merge it with theirs so that we can build an even bigger community. And they've been very hospitable to me. And I just want to give them a shout out and thank them. They've just been awesome people to work with, and I am very happy and appreciative of that. Let's see. Outside of that, big shout out to Got Game. Also, we did our first tournament out in Plymouth, and again, uh, Steve, Cam, awesome people. I've known them for years. Glad to be able to work with them and get their Warhammer 40k community kind of melded in, so we can just build one bigger community. It's been a fun process. April 21st, I'm running two 40k events for Region Con. So if you are interested in doing a Friday tournament, it's a 1 day RTT. Uh, it's on BCP, and I believe it's just called the Region Con Tournament. There's Tournament 1 and Tournament 2. It doesn't matter which one you sign up for because I'm just going to move you to the tournament you need to be at based on the numbers that I've got, and that's the way it's going to be. That's it. And again, if you like what you see here, man, just subscribe if you're not subscribing. I appreciate that. We've got a giveaway going on, and May 1st, I'm going to be announcing the winner of the giveaway as long as we hit 300 subscribers by May 1st, which we should be on pace to do. We just hit 174 today. So let's get those subscriber numbers up. Make sure you're sharing my stuff. I appreciate it. You know, it's a great way to support me without actually giving me money. Like Patreon's always nice, but all that money doesn't go into my pocket. It just goes right back into the community. Uh do it. Do it. Uh but yeah, thank you, Dan. It's one of those where, like I said, the money doesn't go to my pocket; it goes right back into the community for building terrain, so that I can run events. And that's what it's always been about for me. Would I like to be able to make money off of doing like tournaments and stuff, just so I can do that full time? Absolutely. But the goal isn't to line my pockets. The goal is to just make the community better. So, you know, if you want to help make the community better with me, the easiest way is to just share videos, like, subscribe, stuff like that. Doesn't cost you anything, and it helps me, and then it lets me give back to the community. So, outside of that, I think we're good. I just, like I said, wanted to touch on the stats one more time because there's some stuff that's being a little misrepresented, and it's not indicative of the actual overall health of the game. And I just wanted to take some time to once again talk to everybody about what's actually going on behind the scenes and why the meta watch isn't always the most reliable source for understanding how good an army is or is not. So, thanks a lot. Again, we'll talk on Monday. I don't know what we're going to talk about just yet. Let me get through the weekend. I've got a whole lot of building to get done. I've got like 5 more boxes of terrain to build, and I got a shitload to prime and paint. And that's all got to be done next week. So I'm going to be on the grind. So we may end up missing some streams next week while I wrap all that up, and then Adepticon after that. So have a good day.